Every time I come to one of these conferences, I spend half of the time in total befuddlement with the language that I hear from the professional sociologists and all of this, because I'm a lawyer. I come from a totally different discipline, and so I'm going to try to do the best I can to avoid legal terms and actually talk to you as a lawyer, human rights lawyer, who has 40 years organizing and doing civil rights work in Texas. And if you're from Texas or have any idea about Texas, you know that we could use about 100 civil rights lawyers to deal with issues that we have. and that's Sister Martha's campaign to become a secret cardinal like Fethullah Gulen. Being Catholics, we know the probability of that is about -0. So I wrote this book because someone said, why don't you write the book? And I had very little to do with the movement. I had gone on an interfaith trip and all that. And I knew nothing about the trial of Fethullah Gulen, but I ended up doing it. I had to have my arm twisted because I actually have a couple other jobs that I do. But there was never a trial written about the trial. I mean, never a book written about the trial, so I thought, man, I love international human rights law. This is a chance I get to write a book about something no one else in the world has written about, and unlike most victims of political trials, he lived. You know, you have Socrates and Jesus and the witches of, so-called witches of Salem, the uppity women of Salem. Generally, you don't live after a political trial, but not only does Fethullah Gulen survive, but this trial had enormous impact in Turkey. It went on for 6 years and 2 years on appeal, but it had an impact because it interplayed with what was going on with human rights in the European Union, and it strengthened each other in the movement toward greater democracy in Turkey. Fethullah Gulen starts out in the military, or the secret, or not the secret courts, but state security courts, sort of like our version of Guantanamo, right? You get to go to the state security courts. He was arrested for being a terrorist. A terrorist at that time in Turkey had absolutely nothing to do with violence, strictly changing the nature of the state. And that's why you see all of this stuff that no one put up on the board, because they're saying he's trying to change the essential nature of the state. Even though Turkey is a secular country, it has a department, a ministry of religion that governs religion. And so the argument was Fethullah Gulen has become that director of religion, changed the nature of the state and all this, and that's why you see this assault on him that occurred at exactly the same time they were getting ready to indict him. So this campaign, vicious media campaign that went on, was part of getting ready for that trial to indict and prosecute Fethullah Gulen. So you see, and I try to look at this historically, what's going on in the country. I look at what's called, the deep state, what's going on in the economy, the realignment of the economy towards Anatolia. Look at this media campaign, who's being disturbed. And I have to say that there were 200 libel cases brought by Fethullah Gulen against the stations, the media. He wins virtually every one. But because there's no penalty under Turkish law, essentially, for libel, this stuff keeps on going and going and going. It's like Fox News. Keep it up, It doesn't have to be grounded in truth. So it went on. But I found, as I just said, enormously interesting was the interplay between the European Union making Turkey's institutions, courts, more democratic. In fact, during the Gulen trial, they had to abolish the state security courts. He was switched over to the civil courts. They had to change the definition of terrorism under which he's charged to include actual violence. Now, transparency issue comes up all the time. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I'm deeply concerned about transparency. But what people don't talk about is in Turkey, when Fethullah Gulen was indicted, so was the entire Gulen movement. There is a profound legal reason for lack of transparency in Turkey. There is a history of going after nonprofits, anti-government institutions, and shutting them down, seizing all of the assets. And in Turkey, even if you're indicted but not convicted, get this, sounds like something we have in the United States. Even if you're indicted and not convicted, the government can still seize your assets. Imagine that. We have that in the United States. So there's a real legal reason for the lack of transparency and the lack of the unity, if you want to call it, of governance. And I think that's something that people are beginning to understand, that while it plays in a different fashion legally in Turkey, it plays in a different fashion in countries like ours, the United States. So anyway, the book, back to the book. What I try to do, I wrote a chapter on what I perceive to be the work of the movement, what I perceive to be the life of Fethullah Gulen, because I wanted to popularize this in a sense of getting the message out. I didn't want it to be a legal piece. I put all the legal documents on the website. If you want to read the court decisions and all of that in Turkish, they're on the website. I tried to make it so that it would appeal to people, help explain the movement, help put the trial in the context that it's in. Now, what's interesting about this, and there's a parallel American trial going on, in which, while this trial is going on in the United States, Fethullah Gulen, who has come to the United States for medical care and decided to stay and gets a visa as a religious scholar, all of a sudden the United States government says, sorry, you're not really a religious scholar, and wants to deport him back to Turkey. Now, you can read my book, or if you're an unaware consumer, as Joshua would call us, you can read my book and find out the connection, why that happened. But I'll tell you, it was Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld over military sales. So anyway, there's this parallel going on in the parallel trial, not a religious scholar. So the same time that the trial ends in Turkey, it ends at the end of 6 years, and then there's an appeal for 2 years. In Turkey, there are 2 courts of appeal. So Gulen wins. Fethullah Gulen wins the trial. The judges say everything is false, all the accusations are false, there's not one shred of evidence about violence. Look at the 200 lawsuits that had been filed about libel. He's acquitted. The appeal goes on for 2 years, goes to both courts of appeal. The first court of appeal is 5 judges, and the next one is 23. He wins, and at the same time, the United States comes to trial, and the U.S. attorney arguing the case, this is our United States attorney arguing the case, says, you need to revoke his visa because he's not really a religious scholar. The judge says, well, what about all these books he's written? What about the picture of him with the Pope? She says, Your Honor, we believe that was photoshopped. This is the United States attorney saying this, right? Well, anyway, the judge has had it. He's a very conservative judge, but he understands a railroad car when he sees one, and he then orders the U.S. to give the government, give Fethullah Gulen his document back, his status. So, this is an amazing victory, I think, in terms of the progress of democracy in Turkey, the change of the economy in Turkey. By no means is it perfect. And every time I have this discussion from someone that I say, man, you make a lot of changes, they say it's not enough. And I say, look at the United States. We've been at it for over 200 years, and we still can't get to where we need to get. So I think the progress in Turkey has been absolutely astonishing. And I have only 2 slides. I apologize for only 2 slides. This is my favorite, because to me, this is what the movement's about. After I published the book and I was over in Turkey talking, I stopped at a school in Antalya, very poor school. I talked about this yesterday morning, but I said to these kids, what do you want to be? And someone says a policeman, and I'm going, great, just what we need is more cops. But anyway, that was his desire, or a lawyer or whatever. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, I'm talking to these kids. This is the same age group that my son and daughters teach in San Antonio. And I'm thinking, they would have no dream absolutely no dream to be these people if they had not gone to one of these schools. So I said at the beginning, I'm not an academic. I'm a lawyer. I teach law. I practice on the ground. I do community organizing. And the movement does this. Awesome. My last slide. In interviewing all kinds of people in Turkey to write my book, I interviewed people that knew nothing about the movement. I interviewed people that knew a lot about the movement. I met a lot of people who suffered, exiled, some were persecuted, who aren't part of the movement but believe in the political openness that ought to be accorded the movement. And as I was writing the book, I came across this amazing quote from Noam Chomsky, who, as you know, is a very far left member of the American political analyst group, or whatever you want to call them, great professor. And I'm going to conclude with this, else I'll get another note from Emory. And he doesn't let me keep them. He pulls them back every time he gives me one.
We'll be staying back after school.
All right, here's the last, this is it. Here's Chomsky. I know of no other country where leading writers, artists, journalists, academics, and other intellectuals have compiled such an impressive record of bravery and integrity in disobedience to try to bring oppression and violence to an end, facing and sometimes enduring severe repression, and then returning to the task. It is an honorable record, unique to my knowledge, a record of which the country should be proud, and one that should be a model for others. Thank you very much.